They say one man's trash is another man's treasure, but in this case, the trash is worth a jaw-dropping $400 million, and Parker Schnabel just stumbled upon it. Deep in the wilderness, buried beneath layers of grime and rust, he uncovered a long-forgotten Trommel, a colossal gold processing machine that hadn't seen use in decades. But what shocked everyone, it wasn't empty. Inside, Parker discovered gold, a lot of it, enough to make history. But how does something so valuable get left behind? And more importantly, what's Parker planning to do with this once-in-a-lifetime find? Let's dive in. At first glance, the Trommel looked like nothing more than a rotting heap of metal consumed by the forest, covered in filth, surrounded by thick brush, and clearly abandoned for what looked like forever. It didn't seem promising. But Parker and his crew had a feeling there was more to it. This wasn't just some rusted scrap, it was a giant. In its heyday, this machine processed massive loads of earth daily, separating gold from gravel. Unlike today's advanced systems, this beast wasn't built for finesse. It was all about brute force and volume. It crushed through tons of material, but its outdated design meant it also lost a lot of gold along the way, and that's where things got wild. Instead of capturing every fleck of gold, the Trommel let fine dust slip right through the cracks, mixing back into the dirt, and that dirt, it had been sitting there, untouched, for decades. Local rumors had swirled for years about an abandoned gold site hidden in the woods. Some said it belonged to a major operation that went broke. Others believed the land still held untapped gold-rich earth, but no one had dared to go search for it. That is, until Parker showed up. As Parker climbed onto the Trommel and wiped off the grime, something shiny caught his eye. At first, he thought it was just a trick of the light, but as he looked closer, his heart began to race. It was gold, real gold, and not just flakes. This was a serious cache, trapped inside a rusted-out relic. Parker knew it. Visual team testing nearby pay dirt, revealing high gold content. Though, while clearing the area, they stumbled upon a stockpile of old pay dirt. It looked ordinary until they tested it. The results, off the charts. This wasn't just a good haul, this was one of Parker's biggest gold discoveries ever. Visual charts showing gold concentration spikes. Though, the team rushed to build a temporary processing plant, blending old-school techniques with modern tech to recover every speck of gold. Visual team flipping through dusty mining documents, though, but the biggest twist came next. Inside a nearby shack, they discovered ancient mining records. These weren't just notes, they were maps pointing to a hidden network of lost gold sites. Visual animation zooming into old maps connecting to the Trommel site. Though, this Trommel wasn't a fluke. It was part of a massive forgotten mining empire. Visual digital model of the Trommel, drone scans of surrounding terrain. Though, using 3D modeling and drone scans, Parker's team upgraded the Trommel to peak efficiency. It wasn't just restored, it was transformed into a modern mining machine. Visual Trommel processing gold-laden soil efficiently, though, and it worked. The gold flowed day after day, reaching values no one had imagined. Visual split screen, one side of Trommel pouring out gold, the other nearly dry. Though, but something strange happened. One side of the Trommel produced way more gold. The imbalance led to more digging, revealing deeper secrets about the land. Visual excavation teams expanding the dig site. Though, they realized this was just the beginning. Visual old machines being restored in other countries. Though, Parker's discovery set off a chain reaction. From Africa to Australia, other miners began digging up their own forgotten machines, wondering if they were sitting on buried treasure. Visual graphs showing job creation and economic recovery. Though, jobs were created, mining towns revived, history was paying off again. Visual environmentalist touring, restored mining sites. Though, but this was more than profit. Parker proved that gold mining didn't have to destroy the environment. By reviving old machines, he reduced waste, preserved land, and opened the door for a sustainable future. Visual Parker standing next to the running Trommel, reflecting. Though, this project wasn't just about striking it rich, it was about vision, hard work, and seeing value where others saw junk. Parker's Trommel became a symbol of innovation, determination, and respect for the past. Triumphant closing music begins. Visual montage of restored machines, new dig sites, happy townspeople. Though, so, was this just a lucky break, or the tip of a gold-filled iceberg? Visual Parker looking out over the land, gold glimmering in his hand. Though, one thing's for sure, the past still has treasures left to give. Visual Black screen with call to action overlay. Though, if you enjoyed this story, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon. There's more gold to uncover and we're just getting started. Fade out music. This entire project began as a salvage mission, but what it became was something bigger. A blueprint for sustainable, smart mining. By reviving an old machine and blending it with modern technology, Parker and his crew proved that mining doesn't have to rely on wasteful new construction. Sometimes, the answers lie in the past. The success of the Trommel restoration sent shockwaves across the industry. Suddenly, forgotten machines were no longer junk, they were gold-filled time capsules. Mining teams in Australia, Africa, and South America began scouring their old sites, wondering if they'd have been sitting on hidden fortunes. The economic and environmental impact was enormous. Revived towns, new jobs, more efficient gold recovery, and less environmental destruction. Parker's project showed that you could extract gold while preserving the land, a game changer in an industry often criticized for its impact. And it didn't stop there. Universities began researching algorithms to analyze old equipment and predict which machines were worth restoring. Investors saw the value in sustainable restoration. Environmentalists backed the plan. Parker had sparked a revolution not just in mining, but in how the world thinks about innovation, history, and sustainability. In the end, the Trommel wasn't just a machine. It was a symbol of what happens when you look beyond the surface, when you see potential in what others have forgotten. And that's what Parker did. He didn't just find gold, he changed the future of gold mining. And now, the big question is, what's still out there, buried in the past, waiting to be found? Would you like me to format this version into a YouTube video voiceover script with timestamps? Or scenes for visuals next? Epic intro music begins. Visual, slow drone shot over dense Yukon forest. Though, they say one man's trash is another man's treasure. But what Parker Schnabel found buried in the wilderness? That trash could be worth $400 million. Visual, old, rusted mining equipment covered in moss. Close-up shots of a corroded trommel. Though, hidden under layers of rust and dirt was an abandoned trommel, a massive gold processing machine no one had touched in decades. But here's the shocker. It wasn't empty. Inside, Parker found real gold, a discovery that could rewrite gold mining history. Visual, flashback-style animation showing the trommel working in its prime. Though, back in its day, this beast chewed through tons of soil, separating nuggets from dust. But its brute force design missed fine gold, letting it slip through and vanish into waste piles. Visual, overlay of Parker discovering the machine and brushing off dust. Though, as Parker stepped onto the decaying frame, a glint of metal caught his eye, and it wasn't just a flake. It was a gold nugget trapped inside the machine for decades. Visual, team inspecting trommel. Parker reacting excitedly, though, but excitement quickly turned to challenge. The trommel wasn't just old, it was falling apart. To access the gold, Parker had to move the whole thing out of the forest and rebuild it from scratch. Visual, time-lapse of cranes lifting the trommel, trucks hauling it through rough terrain. Though, moving it was a logistical nightmare, every inch a gamble, every turn a risk. Visual, montage of Parker's team repairing gears, welding, replacing parts. Though, at the workshop, the real work began. Rusted bolts, fragile frames, broken gears, everything had to be rebuilt. Piece by piece, the crew brought it back to life. Music rises. Visual, close-up of the trommel starting to spin again. Though, and then, it happened. The trommel roared back to life. Specific visuals, especially for key moments like gold recovery, machine restoration, and document discovery. Polish spoken quotes, or adapt into clean voice-over narration. Enhance emotion and pacing, slow down at emotional peaks and speed up during tech-heavy or repetitive parts. Final verdict. Overall rating, 4.55. This script has all the ingredients of a viral documentary-style video: adventure, treasure, history, technology, and a compelling human lead. With tighter editing and more visual direction, it can easily become a high-retention gold mining feature video. Improved script. What Parker Schnabel found in this abandoned trommel will blow your mind. Gold rush, they say one man's trash is another man's treasure. But in Parker Schnabel's case, that trash was worth nearly $400 million, and it was hidden in the most unexpected place. Deep in the wilderness, buried beneath dirt, rust, and time. What he uncovered was no ordinary find. It was a massive abandoned trommel, A gold processing machine that hadn't seen daylight in decades. But the real shock, it still had gold inside a lot of it. At first glance, it looked like nothing more than a rusted heap of forgotten metal swallowed by the forest, overgrown with vegetation, caked in grime, and barely standing. The machine seemed like it had taken its last breath long ago. But Parker's instincts told him otherwise. This wasn't just some relic. This was a beast-and industrial powerhouse that, back in its prime, churned through tons of dirt every day to extract precious gold. Unlike today's sleek and precise machines, this old Trommel was built for brute force, not finesse. It tore through mountains of earth, but missed much of the fine gold dust. And that's where things get crazy. All that lost gold had just been sitting there, trapped in its forgotten belly for decades. Local legends had whispered for years about an abandoned mining site in the area. Some claimed it belonged to a company that went bankrupt. Others believed the soil still held untapped riches. But nobody had dared to confirm the rumors until now. Parker and his crew moved in, curious and determined. As he climbed the rusted frame and wiped away layers of filth, a glimmer caught his eye. At first, he thought it was just a trick of the light, but a second glance told him the truth. That shimmer was gold, and not just flakes, nuggets, real, unprocessed gold, stuck inside the machine for who knows how long. But there was a problem. The Trommel wasn't just broken, it was destroyed. Years of exposure had corroded the metal, jammed the gears, and weakened the entire structure. To get any gold out, Parker had to resurrect the dying giant, and that meant transporting it, restoring it, and getting it to run again no matter the cost. Moving it was a nightmare. The Trommel was massive, fragile, and stuck in the middle of nowhere. The team had to call in cranes, transport trucks, and engineers to even begin. Every wrong move risked snapping it in half, but they pulled it off inch by inch and hauled it to a safe location to begin repairs. What followed was an uphill battle. Every bolt was rusted, every gear needed rebuilding, every sensor had to be replaced. The steel drum, the heart of the machine, was barely holding itself together. But Parker and his crew refused to quit. Day after day, setback after setback, they chipped away. And then, after weeks of sweat and struggle, the impossible happened. The Trommel roared back to life, and it didn't just work. It worked better than anyone expected. While clearing the area, the team made an unbelievable discovery: a stockpile of old pay dirt buried near the Trommel. At first, it looked ordinary, but when they tested it, the results stunned everyone. The concentration of gold was off the charts, richer than any site Parker had ever worked on. This wasn't just a lucky find. This was a gold mine hidden in plain sight. With no time to build a full wash plant, Parker set up a temporary station using a mix of classic and modern tools. He wasn't taking chances this time. Every speck of gold would be recovered and recovered. It was day after day. Gold kept piling up. The numbers were mind-blowing. Parker realized he hadn't just made a good haul, he had uncovered one of the biggest finds of his entire career. But the story doesn't end there. While digging through the old site records, Parker's team stumbled upon something even more shocking: a collection of detailed maps and logs. These weren't just random notes. They pointed to a hidden network of abandoned mining locations, and they all traced back to this very Trommel. Suddenly, it wasn't just a lucky break. This machine was part of a forgotten empire, lost to time. The documents described regions with unbelievable gold concentrations, areas untouched for decades. It was like finding a treasure map that had been gathering dust for years. With this new information in hand, Parker now had the key to more discoveries. But before chasing the next gold-rich site, he had to finish the job. Restoring the Trommel wasn't just about extracting gold anymore, it was about preserving history. Each dent, rusted bolt, and worn panel told the story of miners long gone. Their legacy, their hard work, was now in Parker's hands. So he brought in specialists. Every piece of metal was reinforced. Every weak joint was rebuilt. They even created a digital twin of the Trommel, a 3D model that allowed them to test upgrades virtually before applying them to the real machine. Drones scanned the area for new dig sites. High-tech sensors were installed. What was once an ancient wreck was now a modern gold hunting machine. When they finally fired it up, all eyes were on the output, and the Trommel delivered. It pulled gold faster and cleaner than anyone predicted. But then, something odd happened. One side of the Trommel was producing more gold than the other. That was unusual. Was it a flaw in the machine, or a clue that more treasure was buried unevenly in the ground? The team investigated, and what they found only fueled more excitement.